This webinar falls part of our theme on Goal to Net Zero, which is obviously a very popular topic at the moment. This is one of 3 events that we're hosting where we're looking at how the property industry can become more sustainable, more green, and meet their ESG commitments through the use of technology. I'm really excited that we've got a fantastic panel today from the property side, but also from the prop tech side as well, with leading tech companies in this space, CIM and Demand Logic, who are gold members of UKPA as well. If you're interested in getting involved in more of these events, then please do reach out to myself or my colleague, Frankie Wright, where we can give you a bit more information about the membership and the events that we've got coming up over the coming months. Without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Louisa Dickens from LMRE, PropTech Recruitment Specialist and Partners of UKPA, who's kindly agreed to moderate today's session. And she will introduce herself and the panel. If I can get all the panelists to also turn their videos on and turn their mics on as well. Thanks very much.
Awesome. Thanks for that, Sammy. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the UKPA webinar on Goal to Net Zero, Optimising Building Management. So it's no secret that man-made structures and infrastructure contributes heavily to global pollution. The built environment has a significant impact on the changing climate we are experiencing, including today's winds, which are so strong. The building sector alone contributes to 40% of global carbon emissions, inclusive of construction and operations. Things like heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems use more than 60% of a building's total energy consumption, which is crazy. And decarbonising the sector is crucial to achieving the commitments made under the Paris Agreement and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Now, when done right, decarbonisation not only addresses global environmental challenges, but can also contribute to cost savings, social equity, tenant and employee health, and well-being, something which I like to call a win-win. So today we'll be discussing how we can reduce these carbon emissions through data-driven insights to maximize operational efficiency, and how we can use tech-driven solutions to rapidly reduce energy consumption across building portfolios. And we will do this with our amazing panel. So we have Andres Guzman, who's Head of Sustainability at Colliers. We have Mike Darby, co-founder and CEO of Demand Logic. We have also joined by Stephen Hull, UK Development Director at Amro Real Estate Partners, and Paul Walsh, the GM of EMEA at CIM. And for those who don't know me, as Sammy briefly said, I'm the co-founder of LMRE, which is a global built environment and innovation recruitment firm. So if you're looking to hire or for a job, please reach out. But also I host the property technology podcast, which is called The Propcast. And we have season 5 coming out. So if you're looking to find out more about this space, sustainability, all sorts of verticals within real estate technology, please subscribe. But enough about me. We might as well kickstart with all the questions. And maybe we'll start with a question around sustainability strategies. So we're obviously seeing a massive growth in sustainability strategies and having them prioritized with various owners, operators and developers. So Steve and Andrew, maybe one for you guys to sort of get started with, what areas of improvement are you looking at the moment to optimize the performance of a building? How does it fit into your sustainability strategy if you have one? Maybe Stephen, you can go first, followed by Andrew.
Sure, thank you, Louisa. Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here on the panel. So I think we'll just start with, you just mentioned there, Louisa, about sustainability strategies. So at Amro, we're a developer and operator, and we've made a net zero 2030 commitment recently, and we're just working it through in all of its details, looking at carbon embodied and operational, sort of through the whole life of the assets that we develop, that we currently have, the new ones coming forward, and then the operation of it. So really the overall strategy for us is really to have sustainability at the top of every agenda and kind of driving the decisions that we make at every level, really, almost to become the DNA rather than a bolt-on or a peripheral part of our property development. And really, one of the ways we do that is when new schemes come forward, or even existing that we're looking to refresh in a more sustainable way, is really just to mitigate the constraints to start with. So, for example, if we move to an air source heat pump solution from the energy side, we just need to make sure we've actually got the roof space to do that. So we kind of just got to work through the practical side of that. So really, that is our sustainability strategy, is to have sustainability alongside almost the architect as the first appointment, drive that into the project brief, and then the rest of the team then almost to deliver that as an objective, which is a bit of a mindset change, I think, a bit of an overhaul of maybe how development is done, or has certainly been done. To go to the actual question of how do we then sort of practice that in terms of areas of improvement, I guess for us really there's two key areas. One is existing stock and one is new stock. So on the new stock side, we're looking at, I guess, everything.
Sorry, can I just stop with that? I think we might, if you take out your earphones, it might be better. There's like, it sounds a little bit scruffy. But I think it might be the AirPods. They just freestyle like I am. I had the same problem earlier.
So I've got
perfect
work next door, so you might hear a bit of construction work going on.
All right.
Is that okay? Is that okay? Cool. Great. Thank you for that. Yeah. So in terms of our new stock, we're really looking at really a fabric first approach to the new development. So looking at reducing energy demand, then consumption, and then actually looking at the energy resources themselves. So that's really a lot of it is around energy, but using a fabric approach rather than just like an M&E solution. So looking at all of that, and I'm really looking ahead to things like REBA 2030, the London plan that's emerging, and also the GLA circular economy and all that's coming forward there, and just embedding that into the principles. And actually, one thing that's really interesting is around existing stock. Is how do you take an existing building and refresh it so that it's actually going to have a much better, much reduced carbon footprint than maybe it is at the minute. And we've got one scheme actually I was on a call this morning before this with our sustainability consultant on a scheme we've got coming forward that we were going to demolish and chuck a 28-story tower up, which we've changed our strategy now. We're going to retain the existing structure and make modifications to it so that the embodied carbon is already sort of within that. So I think really it's really getting reducing the impact across the whole piece.
And Andres, from a Collier's standpoint, what are you prioritizing at the moment in terms of sustainability?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I guess we have a dual function. We have our own sustainability strategy for our own offices and fleet, and we also partner with our clients, to help them navigate this complex landscape in terms of legislation and market expectations, but also as more and more organizations commit to some form of a carbon target, then we partner with them to accelerate that journey. But I want to focus maybe on building performance, and I think when we talk about building performance, it really needs to be assessed in a holistic way. In my experience, whenever we talk about a good performing building, it tends to be a building where people want to be there in the first place. And that means a building that is safe, healthy, sustainable, and a building that probably inspires you in one way or another. And of course, driving down utility consumption and carbon emissions is key in that race to net zero and in the climate crisis. But I'm sure you'll all agree that the main function of a building is not to conserve energy. And I think historically there has been a tendency to focus on energy when we talk about building performance. But now that technology has allow us to have more visibility, more transparency on how we use buildings and indoor parameters such as the quality of the air that is being pumped into a building. I think we can almost think of a building as a system where energy is the input, and then the indoor environmental quality of that experience that you give to the building user is really the output. And it's a tricky task to achieve because of the intricate relationship between energy efficiency and indoor environmental quality. But part of the question is how we assess at portfolio level. So I'm probably here today with my property management hat. We managed thousands of properties on behalf of investor clients and some occupiers as well. And benchmarking, for example, has been an incredibly useful tool to identify outliers, and then to focus efforts on buildings where perhaps there's an opportunity to generate more impact. But those benchmarks have only told us half of the story, because it's all well and good if you have a building that is really energy efficient, but how do we know if it's actually providing the right conditions for that user? So I think we need to move towards a system where the user, the building user, is at the center of it, and again, I think technology is gonna drive that shift. So I mean, in essence, to the question, I think a good performing building is has to have the user in mind, but it also needs to be a building that is utilized and is obviously delivering some form of a return to the landlord at the same time.
And we've now touched upon a few solutions. Over to Mike and Paul, and Mike can go first. How can property technology solutions help, obviously, property managers or developers, landlords deliver on these ESG and sustainability strategies we've just touched upon?
Well, we believe, and I guess we're demonstrating as well, that PropTech is uncovering huge opportunities for building, improving building operations. Lots of things that, whilst they're relatively simple to implement, they've previously been impractically labor intensive to find, I suppose. And also you need 24/7 diligence as a human to actually avoid slip back, to actually avoid buildings returning to their previous state. That's realistically, it's completely impractical for humans to do that task. So that's where PropTech has come in, I suppose. And you mentioned in the preamble as well that commercial properties, around 60, well, we see 60 to 80% of energy consumed by heating, ventilation, air conditioning. So it's an obvious first port of call if you want to have a profound effect on ESG. So really the opportunity here is that, particularly in commercial buildings, non-domestic buildings, they're already generating huge amounts of data, which are actually giving reference to all of their energy consuming assets. But historically, this data has kind of been largely lost or only looked at for a snapshot in time, very, very briefly, and so on. So what we're doing is providing a system that kind of analyzes that data 24/7. That's the whole point of having something automated, is it doesn't get bored. So by analyzing that, looking at what's going on, and then telling operators exactly where to find energy wastage and how to rectify it, you can then provide them ongoing assurance that the remedies have been successful. So I guess the role in PropTech in this instance is really to gather, store, analyze data, give insight as to what needs fixing first, given as well that the analysis is of data that you're generating already. So if you're a property owner, you've already invested in the systems that are generating the data. The next step really is just to find out where your quick wins are. I mean, we believe that kind of approach is without doubt the quickest and cheapest and easiest way to step towards net zero.
And Paul, is there anything you'd like to sort of build upon there?
Yeah, I suppose just to follow on from some of the points Mike raised, I suppose what I'd like to add to it is that if you think about it from a landlord's perspective, that right now they're facing rent erosion, they're facing low occupied buildings, and now they've been hit with making sure that their building becomes more sustainable, and the availability to get capital to to put in solar PV or to upgrade your building envelope is difficult to get, right? And there's no appetite from investors to say we need more money to upgrade our buildings. So I suppose a big part of what the data analytics offers, or a PropTech solution like data analytics offers to landlords, is that it enables them to do more with less. So they can optimize their buildings and reduce the waste that Mike and you referred to there, that 60% of the energy consumption being on HVAC, using the data that's already there and applying some software and technology to it. You can eliminate the waste, and you get an immediate increase in your sustainability rating because you're reducing your energy, so you're reducing your CO2, and it's a very quick win, if you like, for landlords, and it allows them to start on their sustainability journey by doing the best thing, in our opinion, and I think the panel would agree. The first step would be to eliminate the waste or reduce the inefficiencies that exists on existing plant and equipment. So that would be my point. I suppose typically that, you know, ESG has been seen as very capital intensive. Data analytics is kind of turning that on its head, and it's allowing landlords and FM companies to go after what was previously, you know, this famous low-hanging fruit term that everyone refers to, but yet it's very hard to identify and to resolve. So I think data analytics has certainly been a transformative solution in the PropTech space.
Talking of solutions, Stephen and Andreas, you know, what innovative solutions have you implemented into your buildings to make them more sustainable? Maybe they're external, maybe you're building something in-house. Andreas, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, we see a range of solutions. We inherit a number of buildings, and those come usually with some form of system in place. And I think you can put the solutions in terms of data analytics on a scale where on the left hand side you've got minimal human intervention. So like the panacea of everything is automated. The systems are communicating with each other, and they go and reach an actuator that will change the parameter for ventilation in a particular area. And at the other side, you've got perhaps the more software based solutions that give you real insights into what needs to be done to achieve the same outcome. And what I've found is that no one solution fits all. Every building is different. We'll have different strategies. We'll have different setup in terms of the site teams and the M&E setup as well. So what I've found that is actually more useful and perhaps more impactful is education. Getting our building managers, our FMs, to really understand the programs that are being implemented, really, getting them to understand those insights that are coming from those systems, to get them realized, because it's not as simple as highlighting that you need to make a tweak on a BMS system. There's a process, to do that, and we find that the solutions that are just software based kind of like lack on that expertise, on that implementation expertise. But yeah, there's a full range of solutions that we see out there, and I think the emphasis should really be on the educational side.
Yeah, building on this, before we hopped on this podcast earlier, I mentioned that I listened to a podcast by Biff Bull, and Brendan was interviewing the Senator of the White House, Senator Sheldon, and they were talking about accountability. So in terms of education, who's sort of in control of it? Should it be the landlord educating the tenants? Should it be the operator? Who should be taking control of this instead of insisting that we learn about this space? Andreas, in your opinion, should colliers be doing education within, I don't know, whether surveyors, should they be talking to their clients about it? Who's most accountable?
Yeah, so I mean, the way we do it at Colliers is that sustainability or ESG is really not my job. Is everyone's job. I'm not trying to push responsibility to anyone else, but that's really the only way in which you can make change. If you think about net zero targets, what what the landlord sees as their direct emissions will probably not include the tenants use. Think of a multi-let building, for example, except that those are now part of the extended footprint in terms of those emissions. So the only way to reduce whole building emissions is really to collaborate together. Yeah. And we are seeing how through lease provisions, that sharing of data, that just opening a channel to say, look, for example, for an alteration, this is how we want you. These are the principles that we want, that we should follow. Is for the benefit of both. There are some legislative requirements that need to be taken into account. So collaboration is the way. It's not going to be one party's responsibility, and we are advocating for landlords to really reach out to tenants and open that dialogue.
Yeah, I guess it's going to be definitely a sort of top down and bottom up approach, from like education, changes in syllabuses for universities, schools, senior management in these big businesses, and taking it seriously. But yeah, sorry, let's go back to the questions. Stephen, what about you? What solutions are you implementing into, I guess, your buildings, your developments?
Yeah, just coming back to that first piece with Andre, I think the user is critical. So you take some of our student schemes or the build to rent schemes we've got coming forward. I think that user education is really important, whether it's the operational, unregulated carbon or regulated, whichever, I think there'll be behavioural change if that data was there, that residents or tenants could understand their footprint that they had. And I think that's where really data and monitoring, breaking down small power from lighting, just breaking it all down so that everyone knows their impact and sort of getting the buy-in. And I think getting tenants, residents to use buildings properly is a really important point. So the tech can be great, but again, whether it's the building manager or the resident not using it properly, it kind of isn't useful. As well, so to the question, sorry, in terms of reducing energy consumption, I'd probably go back one step before that as a developer. So I'll put my developer hat on for a minute. So I think the first thing we really try and do is to actually reduce energy demand before we then look at consumption. So the whole lean passive strategy, I think, needs to become more important in property development. So things like, I'll just throw a few things out that we're looking at. So the orientation of a building, simple point, but it has a massive impact. A fabric first approach, so you look at your U value, your thermal bridging, air permeability, glazing specification, how much glazing you have, all those things that can reduce the air conditioning that we've already heard has a big impact. So I think we really try and push high efficiency systems in the passive strategy to reduce the demand, so that then we have less of an issue when it then comes to consumption. I mean, on the consumption point, it's a really interesting question. I guess we're really looking for ideas as well, looking for the tech to come forward as well. I guess, I guess we would be all aware of, LED light fitting rollout and lighting controls as an example. So they're not on when they don't need to be on, that sort of thing. I guess we all remember the days before laptops when we went to an office and we thought we were doing our bit by putting a screensaver on overnight, rather than turning the machine off and just reducing that consumption. So I think, again, what we're trying to do is the education piece. I think the biggest way to reduce energy is actually, as you said, education, and then just having the tech, getting people to connect with the tech. And if you have the passive strategies, I think you're in a good position. And I guess good tech has come forward as well in things like mechanical ventilation and heat recovery. There's now the same in water. Water heat wastewater recovery and things like that. And I think if you think of something like passive house as a strategy, a lot of passive house is around passive measures, junctions, detailing, and things like that. And one other point I'll just make, and this is, we're in the early days of looking at this, but this is really more relevant to apartments than maybe an office block or something. But quite often we say we're designing an apartment in a traditional way and we'll just fit the energy solution around how we want the apartment to look. But actually what we haven't maybe traditionally to date looked at is how far has the air got to travel for the heating system, for example. So it might need lots of heating boost because of just the way we've designed it. So maybe, for example, we could reduce the air run. So maybe the utility service cupboard should be nearer the facade. Maybe that would then reduce the requirement for heating boost. So I think I guess we don't have all the answers yet. We certainly don't, but there's a lot I think the industry can look at to reduce consumption, as well as then the green strategies about where you get your energy from.
Yeah, well, I guess this is perfect time for Paul and Mike to talk about how their products can help in reducing energy consumption to sort of benefit, obviously, the landlord and tenant. And so, Paul, tell us a little bit more about what your product can do this.
So what CIM have done is we've developed a software that helps people operate large, complex assets at their peak performance, and that delivers the environmental but also the economic benefit to the clients. And I suppose just touching on a point that you raised and Stephen touched on as well, is around the involvement of the people, right? We feel that software on its own, I think Andrea's touched this as well, won't ever work. You need a people element. You need to, empower the technicians who will make the change as to the reasons they want to do it. So I suppose a big part of what we feel needs to happen is, especially around your question, Louisa, was around the who should be championing ESG, and definitely we feel that the landlord should be driving the ESG strategy for the building, and they should be insisting that any tenants, they sign up to a green lease, and part of that is that they will share data with companies like CIM or Demand Logic or whoever is optimizing the building, that that they'll become part of the community that operates the building, and then everyone is aligned to run it efficiently. And technology like ours allows that to happen, as I say, for a no upfront cost and in a very short period of time. So I think it has a lot of upsides for landlords and for tenants.
Well, I've got a question. So you mentioned a quick win. How quick is quick? What sort of time frames are we looking at? Because I'm pretty naive about this.
So it can be days, right? What we typically find is that, when you apply the software to look at, to Mike's point earlier, buildings are generating terabytes of data right now, but they're all in silos. So there might be a BMS data source, there might be an energy metering data source, there might be outside weather, there might be occupancy. They're all individual siloed data streams. But when you apply technology to those, and when you blend all those data sources into one, you can apply fault detection diagnostics rules, and that picks up when plant and equipment is not running the way it was originally commissioned. And the software will pick that up usually in minutes, right? Or in 15 minutes. And then it's the resolution of that action takes a couple of days, because it's just a matter of working collaboratively with the on-site team. But an example to touch on your question, Louisa, would be around, we often find plant and equipment that should be dynamically responding either to outside weather or to occupancy. An example would be a boiler or a chiller. Sometimes that can be, the automatic modulation of that can be overridden, and someone could have left it into what's called a manual mode, and it can be running at 100% 24/7. And the people who occupy the building will never know, because they're still getting air at 12 or 15 degrees or whatever they need for that conditioned space. But when the software runs across that data set, it picks it up to say, hang on, that chiller is running 24/7. It shouldn't be. Please go up and switch it off. And when you switch it off, you see an immediate energy reduction. So that's an example of some of the waste that can be realized in a very, very short period of time by applying technology.
It's incredible, the power of accurate data, isn't it? Now, Mike, tell us about Demand Logic in reducing energy consumption in buildings.
Yeah, I think, again, we're probably going to be singing off the same hymn sheet here, but looking at data and how buildings are operating is the quickest solution, and that's exactly as Paul said. You are minutes away from finding insight, and you might be days away from actually fixing it. We maybe come on to it later, but one of the challenges really is about getting process in place, and trying to get rid of a little bit of the what's the word? The conflicts that you see with some of the teams operating the buildings, that they feel that they're stuck in the formal ways of working, so they're not going to go and look at this problem yet because it's not on the maintenance schedule. So part of the challenge is kind of winning hearts and minds and making sure that we can get a process in place with that team and get them, in a kind of iterative virtuous circle, I suppose, so they're continually improving the operation of the building. I mean, the point you made about landlords and occupants, it's really a big challenge. I think in this country more than some, where landlord often has responsibility for the entire building services. Over here in a tenanted or multi-tenanted building, it's even harder, where you'll have numerous facilities management teams responsible for different aspects of the building, and that can lead to either conflict, in the worst cases like conflict, or I suppose equally badly in terms of the outcome, apathy. That's not my problem, that's someone else's problem. To Paul's point about big massive plants, boilers and chiller plants running 24/7. Now, if the landlord is receiving demands from tenants that say, we want the boilers or chillers to be on for this period of time, then the landlord would just say, well, that's what the system asks for. So we're simply providing the customer what they need. So the point here, a real important point, is by looking at who's got what demand when, and by looking at the data sources that already exist, you can create a tremendously rich and granular picture of who's using the energy. This isn't just about metering. This is actually just looking at the source, the tiny, hugely numerous individual pieces of plant that are calling on those services. So what you can do working with a landlord is kind of provide them with that insight to give to their tenants and potentially generate competition. To some of the earlier points about education and about the human aspect of it, if you're creating competition between tenants just by sharing their consumption data, this tenant is highest of the top of the lit table of consumption, that can generate healthy competition where people are going to drive down their services. These things have been completely opaque, I think, throughout history of buildings. The data does exist, and the ability to get it in front of the right people does exist. I mean, the other thing for landlords as well, we're seeing lots of really key engaged landlords spearheading this approach, but there are others who aren't. I think fundamentally, there's a I suppose the scary point is that it's about brand reputation, isn't it? I mean, if a landlord is able to pass on energy costs to a tenant, then you could argue that and that's either directly or via the service charge, you could argue that there is no incentive for them to save energy at all. But frankly, I think landlords who aren't interested in how the assets are actually performing will lose out in the long run. We're seeing people really, really pushing this now.
So you mentioned it can create competition, but surely it can also, if we can see all that data in front of who's actually using the energy, can it also sort of hopefully encourage a bit of collaboration, how to sort of tackle these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really beginning to work is where you have a forum, where people can share ideas about that. And I think being able to talk around, we keep saying about data, it's not really talking around data. I mean, it's talking around the insight that the data has generated. It's like, we did this and this achieved that, so why don't you think about it, yourselves? The biggest one, probably, I expect Paul would agree, like if you're looking at a kind of open plan floor, say a tenant has 3 floors in a big building, the misconception that each individual area needs to have its, the set point, the target temperature, exactly where they want it. Now, the reason that I think that misconception has come about is because systems have been in conflict for many years. And what I mean by that is if one system is generating heat and the adjacent system is generating coolth, whoever's kind of in the airstream of one of those systems as they battle it out is going to feel really uncomfortable, and their complaint will generate a change that quite likely makes things even worse. Now, that there has to be a sort of an amnesty where I guess that the FMs, the landlords, and the occupants are all allowed to talk about this and say, look, really what we need to do is move all of the target temperature somewhere sensible, right in the middle, and broaden the gap between heating and cooling. And the likelihood is you'll all feel more comfortable. Those that don't, there's another problem. It's not about that temperature. It's very likely to be, something else, like a draft, or there's bad insulation near some particular wall, or some heavily glazed area with solar gain. But stuff that can be fixed. But we've got to stop this cycle of deterioration, I suppose, where you know, that things are conflicting with one another. And that collaboration, sorry, the point about collaboration is that that's the perfect forum to do it. You really, really need to be able to bring these things out to the table.
Yeah,
Stephen,
oh yeah, well, go for it, Stephen.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic point. And just to follow on from it, I think what we need to do as a prop tech sector is we need to take the, you know, the challenge, move it out of being a facility management or a facilities issue, that they own the energy reduction, and somehow communicate it to the wider building occupants that, you know, by them changing the set point to be really high or really low in the particular area that they work, is having a net impact on the inefficiency of the building, and how to bridge that gap in their head. Because someone's changing a thermostat might say, listen, I'm making no difference, or I can make no difference to the energy efficiency of this building. But being able to articulate that and you know, showing them that every single participant or individual component of a building is directly correlated to how they want their area to be run, is immensely powerful. And you get that behavioral change, you get that, you know, the coalition of the willing, the changing the mind and the hearts that Mike mentioned. That's exactly what happens. And people then can individually take steps that will help, you know, make the building more efficient. And how, I suppose, as data analytics companies, we get the data that has typically been opaque and make that transparent and easy to understand for the non-technical person occupying a building is immensely powerful. Yeah. And I think genuinely people, and again, everyone knows that there's a climate crisis impending, right? So people have a tacit knowledge and a genuine desire to help. It's just they don't know what steps to take when they go to work or when they occupy a large building, in our experience.
So does that come down to, and Stephen, we spoke about this briefly last night, that comes down to various stakeholders getting involved. So Stephen, is there anything you want to add to sort of what Paul just said?
Yeah, I think that was really helpful. And I think another thing that obviously as sort of developers and operators, I think one thing that's probably really important, that again, I just don't think happens well enough at the moment, which is a bit of a self-criticism, I suppose, but it is really the developers or the builders in, you know, almost collaborating and integrating with the building owners before we build the building, so that we take all your learnings and all the kind of efficiencies that you want to build into your operation, and make sure we give you a building that enables you to do that. So, you know, I think, you know, I've been in projects where, you know, we've kind of hamstrung the operation by some of the decisions we've made during the design process or the build process. We saw it early in the build to rent cycle as well, where, you know, we didn't give this as an industry, I'm talking, we didn't give. We forgot about the back of house areas that the 24/7 staff might need, because we just weren't used to designing buildings where there was 24/7 operational staff on site, because it was more the build to sell model. So I think the collaboration between the developers and then the operators, I think, is really important. And then the users as well. And in terms of other key stakeholders, I think that there's a lot of key stakeholders here. I think I'm kind of really conscious at the moment as well that there's no real net zero certification, no piece of paper you can kind of go for and say, look, we've got it, which again, I think is a bit of a disincentive almost that there isn't that goal or that target. And I'm sure that'll come forward. So what we're sort of trying to do on our side is develop a sustainable development framework. From that will come a sustainable procurement plan. And then we'll get that tested by GRESB or the social value portal or something that makes us accountable for what we're doing. And I think a key stakeholder in that will probably be the GLA and their circular economy and their requirements that they're bringing forward for consumption. And then integrating that into building regulation. So really getting it into the building process so that the operational efficiency can kind of then flow from that. I think bringing all those together. But for me, to the question of collaboration, I think this is everyone's responsibility. It's everyone's planet, isn't it, at the end of the day? And I think for me, collaboration is all about a shared vision and kind of aligning goals and then just traveling on the path together, really. I think is the only way we're gonna get there.
Yeah, we keep touching briefly on on data, and I think we need to maybe delve into how can data better utilize, maximize operational efficiency, and is that through different businesses, stakeholders as well, sharing the data, because there's all these issues that surround data ownership. You know, Andres, would love to bring you in on this from a Collier's angle as well.
Yeah, I think the benefits of sharing, the data that we hold for developers, for example, to take that into account. I mean, there's a movement that comes from Australia for developers to think about the operational rating of the building that they're designing right, from the start. Which is something that we don't do here in the UK. And I think just sharing data from all of these systems is valuable data for a number of stakeholders. The government could use it. The solutions that we see out there, I think probably need to. There's still a way to get them to be more open. So we definitely need to learn the lesson that we had with the BMS industry and vendor lock-ins and all of that. I think we need to make open protocols the default option, so we can gather all of that data and really start doing some smart benchmarking. I mean, again, I think the government has a great opportunity to absorb all of that data and making it functional for the rest of the industry.
Is there anyone else who'd like to add to that?
Just
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I mean, I totally echo that about the principle of smart benchmarks. I mean, so there's, all the data that's being generated by a building, obviously, as Paul said, there's terabytes of it. It's a huge amount. It's only useful if it's analyzed and put into something useful. So we've been long considering the challenges of benchmarking. So if you're looking at pure energy benchmarks, it's virtually impossible to get a really fair one. Some of the categorization is very broad. Like this is a prestige air conditioned building, but there are factors that are so hard to normalize. I don't know if Stephen would agree, but you mentioned about building orientation. There's the fabric of the building. If you're working with an old building, then you're always going to struggle with it on an energy benchmark. We think a fairer and smarter way of actually benchmarking buildings is to just look at how you're operating them. That obviously things like fabric should be taken into account in a broader spectrum, but you need to get credit where credit's due. If you're operating a building as well as it can be within the constraints of its location, its geography, its orientation, and the huge capex issues of kind of replacing massive amounts of fabric, you should be able to get credit saying this building is working as well as it could under the facts it has. And that also ties in to Andre's initial point about a building has a purpose. It's to keep the occupants happy and productive and so on. So that should be part of the benchmark. So what we've been working on, and we're working with the RICS, we're working with we're opening this up to CIBSE as well. We're looking at how you can use that operational data that's being generated to create an overall building operational performance score. We're really happy to collaborate with anyone on this, by the way. It's not something that's closed. And we think that is ultimately, for us, just by generating that score within a customer's own portfolio, not open to everyone else yet, but showing them anonymously how they compare to their peers, has been the single biggest driver for improvement in buildings. That knowing where do I really stand, and even in my own portfolio, no one wants to be at the bottom of the table. So everyone sort of rallies around the tables that are the properties that are languishing and gets them pushed up.
Paul, do you want to go ahead? I know you're sort of cut off briefly then.
Yeah, no. It's just to follow up, I suppose, on Andrew's point there. I think the system he's referring to in Australia is called NEIGHBORS, which is the National Australian Building Energy Rating Scheme, and it's been immensely successful there, where buildings are giving a star rating from 0 being very inefficient to 6, which is a kind of a LEED Platinum building. But the benefit of that program, in my opinion, and certainly in the experience of our headquarters in Australia, is that it has, I suppose, the fact that it's an ongoing operational efficiency metric, which the building owner has to do every year, and the building owner has to maintain a certain standard before the building can be rented. So it has I suppose, forced the hand of the landlords or the building owners to ensure that the building is running at the most efficient level it can, and it stays there, right? It's not like a once-off LEED certification that the building can drift over time. It's been an immensely successful program, and I think the BBP are bringing that into the UK, but it's only for new builds. So it's the existing building stock is where the opportunity lies to implement that scheme, and it's been fantastic, really successful.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Andres.
I mean, I was going to say, it's the whole concept of an operational rating, right?
Yeah.
And Paul, you were talking, how do we get the conversation out of the FM room? And I think net zero is probably going to do that,
Sure.
right? There's a number of occupiers looking for the net zero space to fulfill their net zero targets. So landlords are responding to that, and again, data and how you communicate that to a prospect occupant is key to do that. But the only way, to once a building is built, the focus needs to be on the operational side, and the only way to communicate that and to put a KPI to the landlord is to have an operational rating. And yeah, I'm aware that the BVP, the Better Buildings partnership, is doing great work on that, and I think that's going to come sooner rather than later.
We've had some questions come in. So Andres, whilst we've got you, this is one question. So what advice do you have for small landlords looking to make impactful changes about being able to invest in sophisticated BIM monitoring at this stage?
BIM monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
For small landlords. Well, I mean, I think maybe look, BIM is going to open a wide range of options, but maybe you need to take steps to get there. And again, we talked about education. I mean, if there's anything, a practical solution, I think Mike alluded to this, that dead band that needs to exist between cooling and heating systems, that is, from experience, that's the single most effective measure that we have implemented. Just to put that dead band and avoid the conflict of two fan coil units fighting with each other. If you start with the basics, with that, and then try to get more visibility on how your systems are performing, try to get your site teams engaged and educated on how to use that visibility. I think you'll be in a pretty good stage. Then you can start thinking about how to run smart modeling of different scenarios. But I think let's get the basics right, is what I would say.
Fantastic advice. And we've got another question that's come in. What are the unique challenges to the UK property industry? What tips and warnings, if any, I'm sure you guys have both, do the panelists help overseas companies looking to provide solutions to the UK property management companies? Maybe Stephen, do you want to go this from a developer angle, and then we can bring in someone else?
Yeah, so you can just repeat that. So the challenge of what, foreign investment?
Challenges to the UK property industry, and what tips and warnings you have, basically overseas companies coming in.
I think from a property development side, it kind of comes as a whole package, as we've sort of talked through, getting it lean, green, clean, and getting that in. And I think in terms of tech, I think developers are always looking to integrate good tech solutions, both in the construction side and in the development side. And I think this almost comes back down to the educational piece, is how the whole integrates together to create a collective efficiency on the sustainability side. So I don't think there's necessarily specific challenges to necessarily foreign technology as there is with the UK, really. I think it's all part of meeting the emerging regulations and just creating best-in-class solutions.
Yeah. Well, Paul, as someone from who's done various countries and launched getting products into it, maybe you have any tips, or maybe you can shed some light on what you've seen in the UK industry for when you're trying to get your product into certain developers or landlords.
Yeah, I suppose the biggest alteration we had to make as a company was that, you know, climatically, the difference between Australia, where our business was founded, and coming into the UK sector, there was a big differences in the climate, obviously. But I suppose secondly, what's more relevant and more challenging, I suppose, in the short term is how we ensure, you know, the safe return to work policies that a lot of companies are driving around, you know, ensuring that the fresh air intake into buildings is maximized, while ensuring the building remains as energy efficient as possible. And that's often a challenge because, you know, during winter, you have to bring in more cold air, which subsequently has to be heated. And as a result, then your energy consumption might go up. So that, while it mightn't be UK specific, I suppose it is topical right now with the safe return to work policies being implemented. Any other tips or warnings? No, I think everyone we have spoken to in the UK sector is very keen to optimize their buildings. The sector has been very well educated. A lot of companies are aware of what they can do at you know, landlord level and at tenant level to make a difference. So I think the appetite is there for people to make a change. So I think it's ready for any new company to come in and certainly you know, begin to help change the dial. Certainly in our experience. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's another question's coming about the readiness of the industry in accounting for embodied carbon and more specifically life cycle performance. And I'm sure we have lots we can learn from, say, the Nordics, who they've been focusing on this for a lot longer than we are. The US, now they're going to start looking at this and taking it more seriously. Mike, what have you seen in terms of readiness for the industry?
I think technologically we're really ready. I think it's been proven time and time again. There's so many case studies on how we can get buildings working better. The challenges, I think, remain more about structure. You know, we talked about the challenges of, and I suppose this also ties into the previous question about what almost a unique UK challenge. I think one of the reasons, not one of the reasons, but Neighbours was tremendously successful in Australia. If I've understood correctly, and I might be wrong here, but I think in Australia, a landlord would have entire responsibility for the building services throughout a building, regardless of the number of tenants. And it's not usually like that in the UK. You can have any number of FM teams and even separate property management teams on different floors of the same building. So actually trying to navigate your way into a really robust strategy with that to actually improve the building performance is the hardest. It's not about the tech. You know, the tech can straight away show you what to do. It's really getting the buy-in of all the people who need to get involved. I think that's certainly my headline summary.
Yeah, but that's someone's just fired in another question about FM. So we'll go back to you, Mike. How does facility management firms can leverage clients' net zero initiatives and help them reach their targets, costs in effective ways? And this might come down to the whole sort of supply chain management as well we spoke about last night. Yeah,
I mean, I think I'm really sympathetic with FM companies who really you know, the nature of FM is a lot of the time you're just getting beaten up, frankly, for, you know, people don't notice if you're doing a really good job and you get beaten up if somebody's hot or cold. So I think they're also, to a certain extent, feel hamstrung. I'm sure I'll get beaten up for saying this, but by traditional standards, traditional operating methods. So really what FMs need, I think, is that forum again. So to work with their clients to potentially redefine how the service is delivered. You know, this number of FMs have had profit warnings recently, you know, and going back, we've seen a few disappear. They're typically working on kind of 5% margins. There's nothing in there to really be proactive about this. There's another even worse scenario that you see a lot, where because of the pricing pressures, they're kind of driven down to pricing at the absolute bare minimum. So a fixed number of labor hours, but then getting paid additional for hot and cold calls. So things like responding to a hot and cold complaint. So, I mean, you could argue, where's the incentive to actually get a building working right if you're going to get less money? So those kind of contracts, I think, really need to be rethought. But that it's not just the FM going to the client. The client needs to be prepared to listen, to break the existing paradigm, and really, you know, go towards data-led maintenance, frankly, where if you can prove something's working, if there's no statutory maintenance to be carried out, you can leave it alone. You know, you can demonstrate that it's working perfectly well. So just move on to the, you know, work in a prioritized way, work on the things that are wasting energy and causing dissatisfaction.
It's fair to say FM and PM is a thankless task. I don't know how people do it, but also that's where technology can help with it, get rid of all the mundane tasks and sort of actually hopefully make it slightly more enjoyable. I think we're coming to the end of the webinar. If anyone has any more questions they would like to fire into the panelists, we've got a couple of minutes left. But personally, I'd love to obviously thank Frank and Sammy for organising this, the audience being here, and our panel for the great discussion today. And I will send you guys back over to Sammy.
Thanks, Lou. Fantastic job moderating as always, and thank you to all of our fantastic panelists as well. I think you've all shared some really interesting insights. It was really helpful, I think, to understand more about the sustainability strategies within Colliers and AMRO Real Estate Partners, and Paul and Mike, to hear your industry expertise and knowledge on this particular topic as well is invaluable. So thank you all for sharing your insights, and thank you to the audience for listening in and for posting your questions in the chat. We always like to make these as interactive as possible. And on that note, actually, I'd like to mention that we have our next event on the 23rd of March, which is actually looking at data-driven design. So it's the third event as part of this Goal to Net Zero theme. And I think actually Stephen made a good point about how we actually need to share the data that is being used within the buildings and take that back down to the design level. You know, really think about how can we optimize the buildings before they're built. So that will be the roundtable discussion. So if you're interested, please do reach out and we can tell you a bit more about that and the rest of the events coming up this year. So just another big thank you to everyone that's listening in and to our panelists and our superstar moderator, Louisa Dickens. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely day.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thank you.